Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. This will be the second to last episode of my Road to the Arnold Classic preview series. It's been fun, but luckily we'll be seeing the real deal on stage in just a week's time. Anyway, I've been saving this comparison for the end, and it's finally time for the big one. In today's video, we will be previewing Samson Dauda versus Hadi Choopan. These two squared off at last year's Mr. Olympia, where Hadi took second to Samson's third. But after that Olympia, Samson kept competing and did two more shows, getting better at each one. So I want to see if Hadi from the Olympia could come out on top against Samson's most recent showing, the 2023 Prague Pro, which he won. I think this will give us a good idea of how this is going to go at the Arnold Classic. Samson is looking better than ever. I definitely anticipate him to look more like the Prague Pro version we're using today rather than his Olympia appearance. And Hadi is the most consistent bodybuilder since Phil Heath, so this should be a fair and accurate matchup. And boy, is this a matchup. We have a lot to get into today. These guys don't need any more introduction, so let's jump into the video. If you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit that like button, watch my other Arnold Classic previews, and subscribe to the channel for more. Now for my picks of Samson, I just used his posing video from the Prague Pro, that was simple enough, but Hadi's picks from his posing routine from the Olympia were trash because of the lighting and the background. So I used mainly the prejudging call-out pictures for Hadi. The lighting was a lot better and it made sizing a lot easier because I could directly compare the Prague version of Samson to the Samson that was on stage right next to Hadi. With that disclaimer out of the way, here's the front double. The shot is pretty good for both guys, just about every shot is. Both of these guys are very well rounded. But I think right from the jump I have to go with Hadi, and this really shouldn't be controversial. Hadi wins in the arms, clearly. Samson has those longer arms and hasn't yet filled them in enough. His arms are pretty flat. Hadi's biceps peak so much more. Now there are two main aspects in this pose, the arms, sure, but the outline too. I know a lot of guys are going to say Samson wins this because of the outline, and yes, it's great, but is Hadi not also fantastic? In fact, he has the more exaggerated X-frame. In the wheels, Samson takes a win. His sweep is insane, and even though he has less detail than Hadi, he brings enough detail and more than enough size to take the lower body. But his upper body isn't matching. Hadi actually has the better balance. He's wider and thicker through the lats, and he's wide through the shoulders too. His waist is also very tight. So when we zoom out and compare both gentlemen's proportions, Hadi has the more exaggerated X-frame, and he's looking to be more muscular pound for pound. I'm not saying Hadi is more aesthetic, but in terms of carving that X shape, Hadi is winning at least in this pose. Not to mention, when you look at the physiques as a whole, Hadi is much drier, more detailed, and flat out more conditioned. Samson is a lot harder here than he was at the Olympia, but he's not on Hadi's level. I know this is probably not going to be the popular choice, but the way I see it is Hadi wins the arms, the outline, or at least does enough there, and has overall better conditioning and polish. Samson has the better aesthetics, I guess, but this is open bodybuilding. Hadi has great proportions too. It's not like he's Dave Palumbo, but he clearly has more muscularity, more mature muscle at that, and better conditioning. I have to give this one to Hadi. The front lat spread is a lot more balanced for Samson, and now Hadi is the more unbalanced one. When Samson brings the lats into play and shows that width, he can balance his freaky lower body with his now more imposing upper body. Hadi has the problem of lackluster quad sweeps. He played it off well in the last pose, but now he looks a little top heavy. Samson is clearly winning in the legs again, even more so here, and because Hadi looks a little top heavy and because Samson's upper body looks more filled in, Samson wins the overall outline here. Now what about the lats themselves? Both guys are actually really good. I think Hadi actually has a little more development, but his don't taper as nicely. They're a bit high inserting. I will definitely take Samson's lats over Hadi's, even if Samson's are a little less wide, because Samson's taper lower and very nicely into his waist. Even if you give the win in the lats to Hadi, Samson is definitely close enough there and wins enough other areas to secure this pose as a whole. Turning to the side, we have two very different executions here. Hadi is squatting way down and tilting his far pec towards the judges a lot. Samson is standing very tall and is propping those pecs up as much as he possibly can. That's a very old school style of execution, and I personally really like it. And Samson can actually afford to do this type of posing and elongate his body because he's so thickly developed in the pecs. He doesn't really have to twist towards the judges to bring out his pecs. They're already massive. Honestly, some of the best pecs in the IFBB currently. The only thing they lack is a little bit of detail, but other than that, they're full from clavicle to sternum. He beats Hadi in the pecs. Hadi has a little more detail and hardness in his, but his pecs are not jumping off his body like Samson's. I also like Samson's arm and delt more here, surprisingly. Hadi's peaks may have served him well in that front double, but here I prefer Samson's thicker and fuller arm. And in the side leg, I gotta go with Samson, albeit not by too much. Hadi has the superior detail. His separation between quad, ham, and glute is much deeper. But Samson is bringing some good lines too. I think his lighting is actually hiding some of them. If you look closely, this is pretty detailed by Samson standards. I think he's detailed enough that that superior size allows him to eke a victory out here. And then the last thing we have to consider is the overall thickness from the side. Hadi is showing off a lot of shoulder width. He looks very wide, but Samson's superior mass in the pecs, the arm, the side leg, he's definitely the most thickly developed from this angle. Hadi still has a lot of that hardness and is okay body part for body part, but Samson is looking massive in this one. Every part of him is filled in with a ton of mass. And add a win on the pecs in there, and Samson claims another pose. The rear double is definitely each gentleman's worst pose. At the Olympia, both guys were getting smoked by Derek, but now how do they fare against each other? Well, in the lower body, Hadi definitely wins. Samson doesn't have a single glute striation to his name, and the hams on Quaddy are more dug out. Even Hadi's quad sweeps look respectable from this angle. Let's shift focus slightly up to the lower back, and yeah, we can see there's really nothing going on here for either gentleman. Now going up a little more to the mid and upper back, this is where Hadi pulls away. There is just more meat there. Samson's back looks flimsy. Samson has somewhat pronounced details in the upper back, but Hadi just has more raw mass in total. He also has somewhat pronounced upper back details, and he is a bit wider. Hadi also probably takes the arms and delts. Again, I'm not too thrilled to pick either guy. Hadi has more mass in the delts, and his arms aren't super flat like Samson's, but Hadi has those weird lumps in his delts. But at the same time, Samson doesn't have the mass in the delts or the peak in the bis. Overall, this pose is definitely a low point for each guy, but Hadi wins a couple of areas over Samson. Hadi had the more conditioned and just better overall lower half, a meatier back, and I guess you can throw the arms and delts in there too if you can look past those weird lumps. This is one pose where I don't think there's too much of a winner, but I definitely have Samson as the slightly bigger loser. The second back pose, the rear lat spread, is a much better pose for both of these guys, but Hadi still maintains the lead thanks to one main factor: width. You would think that Samson would have that in the back. He's just so big structurally, you'd probably think that that would lend itself to looking really wide in the shot. He's wide, but not Hadi wide. And honestly, I don't like how Samson changed his execution of this pose. He used to lean back a bit further and he would bring out more width, but ever since the last Olympia, he's been keeping his back a little more upright. He's still very wide, but I think the other execution was better. I do like what he's doing in the lower body though. Hadi loses a little bit of ground here because of Samson's posing tweaks. And Hadi doesn't look as defined here now. Samson is also pushing his glutes out a bit more. This brings out the quad sweeps, the adductors, and the hamstrings, but it sacrifices glute details, because you can't really flex them with this type of execution. But in Samson's case, he didn't have any striations to begin with, so he really sacrificed nothing by doing this. I think he honestly may win the lower body at this point. But in the back, Hadi is just too strong. Both guys are kind of smooth. They're not the type of guys that can bring out a lot of detail in the rear lat spread, so that area is a wash. Both guys have good taper, but because Hadi is so wide, his taper is much more exaggerated. And then in the overall width, Hadi wins easily, which is not easy to do when you're going up against a guy who is several inches taller than you. I think both guys get better as a whole when they spread their wings. Samson even managed to pick off the lower body from the last pose, but Hadi does too much in the back for Samson to win this. It's all about width at the end of the day, and Hadi is the widest guy. The side tricep is a good pose for Hadi, for everywhere except the tricep. But Samson has a couple of things that are bugging me about his pose. Firstly, Hadi is sharp, we definitely know that by now. His side leg has the deeper separation than Samson's, the midsection is peeled, and he has abundant chest striations. But his tricep is fairly underwhelming, he just doesn't have the mass there. And in terms of the physique as a whole, Hadi is giving up a lot of thickness and size to Samson from this angle like he was in the side chest. But Samson isn't perfect. He has the better, thicker tricep, he's double the mass of Hadi, but I just wish it was more defined. His tricep blurs in with his delt and the bicep. It could be a lighting thing though. The second issue I have with Samson is the midsection. This isn't a bubble gut, but he needs to lock that in. He just has a hair of distension in the lower stomach. But honestly, these are pretty minor things, especially when Samson wins in the two key areas being the tricep and the overall mass from this angle. Hadi has that chiseled midsection and the extra deep cut in the side leg, but that just isn't enough. He's lacking a good tricep. Neither guy is bringing a perfect pose, but both guys have really good things going for them. But Samson has the more important aspects going for him, which grants him another pose. You know, for how much praise Samson gets for being a return to the mass with class era, I really don't think he's all that good in the abs and thighs. Let's first take a look at this head-on version. This pose is definitely not a good one for him. His stomach isn't the flattest, the abs aren't that sharp, and those big quads, while they have the size, they don't have the cuts. Those are some pretty serious flaws for Samson in this pose, so before we even look beside him, he's fighting an uphill battle. But then when we do look to the side, we see maybe the best abs in the open IFBB currently. Hadi has everything developed: serratus, obliques, abdominals, you name it, and his stomach is more in check. He does have smaller quads, but he has the better separation easily. You can even see a touch of feathering in his teardrop, but you don't really need to look any further than the abs to see a Hadi victory in this variation. But let's look at Samson's other variation, the twisting oblique shot. This is definitely a lot better for him, and both guys did it, so I wanted to consider this too. Samson's abs look a lot more defined here, and his obliques are actually pretty good. I just wish his stomach was a bit flatter. He also now manages to bring in a touch more quad detail. But Hadi, with a superior development in the core, can do a twisting oblique shot too, from any angle Hadi has developed. This is a bit closer than the last variation. Samson is a lot better. Samson is taking the thighs portion of the pose now, I would say. Hadi loses a little bit of detail here, and Samson's quads are just much bigger, so he's able to overtake Hadi. But then you go upstairs and see Samson is getting outclassed in the abs, simply put. Hadi is all around sharper and more deeply etched from abs to obliques, and his waistline is trimmer. Samson is definitely better with this variation, but I still gotta go with Hadi in this one too. And since Hadi won both variations, he easily takes the abs and thighs pose as a whole. Finally, here in the most muscular, I again want to look at two different variations, and we'll start with the hands clasped. Both guys as a whole look massive. Samson towers over Hadi, and that definitely helps, and also helps being 300 pounds and being really round like Samson. But Hadi is really helped out by his great width across the shoulders, which makes him look pretty massive as well. Now looking closer, I would give Hadi the chest. Samson is full, but Hadi is so striated, it's crazy. He has a lot of mass there too. In the upper limbs, I would probably give Samson the delts just for a little more fullness, but honestly, I really like Hadi's delts here. I think they're basically even. I prefer Hadi in the arms in total, and especially in the biceps. Samson's arms have been all over the place in this comparison. He's looked too stringy in the front double, but really thick in the side shots. Here, he's back to looking a little stringy. But to be fair, Hadi has a serious lack of outer tricep sweep from this angle. Making your way down the midsection is a no-brainer. Samson looks a little bloated, and Hadi is, well, Hadi. Now in the legs, I would have Samson. That's the obvious choice by now. But what's more important to pay attention to is how close Hadi can make this. Samson has okay detail, but he's winning mainly on size and sweep. Hadi has a little less size, but is smoking Samson in detail, and Hadi's sweeps don't look as poor here as they did in other shots. Overall in this variation, I don't really see a wrong choice here. Samson is big as a house and is bursting full, but for my money, I'm going with Hadi on this one. He's very wide in the shoulders, the legs look really good here, and he's overall more refined. He has the mass, but way more detail too, and picked up a couple of body parts in this one. His chest and abs are just insane in this shot. I'm honestly more impressed by that than Samson just being big. Now with the second variant, we have the crab. Again, there really isn't a wrong choice here. Both guys pull this one off well, but it's the same story as the last variation, at least for me. Samson looks very massive and full, but Hadi has a granite hard look, with a lot of dense muscle and a boatload more detail. Samson's arms and delts look a lot better here, but there's nothing going on in the chest, and the legs are not as good. Hadi maintains his great leg separation, his biceps look great, the chest is again striated to the max, and overall he just looks so grainy. He has so much more muscle maturity. I again have to go with Hadi. He has a little less mass, a little, but his details are amazing. Again, his mass is a lot more refined. On one day, I could definitely prefer Samson for the impressive overall size and the imposing stature, but not today. And since Hadi won both variations, he rounds this comparison out by taking the most muscular. The final scorecard is on your screen now. It was fairly close, but Hadi did win this comparison with 5 poses to Samson's 3. Hadi won the front double, the back poses, the abs and thighs, and the most muscular. Samson won the front lat spread and the side shots. I'm not going to beat around the bush and try to twist the results. I think Hadi wins today's comparison. This is open bodybuilding. Shape matters, but only as much as size, completeness, and condition. Hadi was shredded, he always is, and he beat Samson in conditioning easily. In completeness, I would also give the edge to Hadi, but not by as much as the conditioning category. But with Samson's lack of good head-on abs, fuller arms in the front double, and his back makes Hadi the more complete one. Now in shape, this is a category Samson picks up, but how close is Hadi? Well, Hadi certainly isn't as pleasing, he is kind of blocky, but he does still have the tighter waist, wide shoulders, and in some shots he straight up had the better X-frame. At minimum, in most shots he had a good one. Now when we add everything up, completeness, shape, muscularity, and conditioning, Hadi wins. And the poses he won I thought were strong wins. I could see Hadi maybe even winning 1 or 2 more poses on his best day. I really wouldn't give Samson any extra shots. Maybe the most muscular. Very simply, Hadi Choopan is the better bodybuilder between the two. And in this comparison with me doing the judging, that's what I reward. A well-rounded physique and a well-rounded bodybuilder. That's why Hadi is the winner. I have serious doubts that this outcome will transpire on show day. Quite frankly, this is not what I think will happen. Hadi may be the winner of today's comparison, but I think on show day, Samson will be victorious. I'm sorry, this may be cynical, but I think this is up to the judging criteria. These guys are apples and oranges, and the IFBB really wants to move in the more aesthetic direction, I feel. We saw that at the Olympia, and we also saw that the Olympia itself was already promoting a Samson and Derek rivalry. The Arnold already has a reputation of going for more aesthetic guys as long as things are close, and I think everything points to that being the outcome. Samson is in his all-time best condition by the looks of his recent updates, and we know he carries a ton of mass and is still fairly complete. I think Samson is going to limit Hadi's margin of victory in the conditioning department, and Samson is going to come in improved like he does at every single show, and with those things, this now comes down to shape. And the IFBB and the Arnold both want more pleasing physiques winning these shows. As long as Samson can keep this close, I think he has it. I'm not saying I agree with it, I'm just reading the room. I think Samson will walk away with his second Arnold Classic title. Hadi is the better bodybuilder, he was in this comparison, and I think he will be on stage. With that, Hadi Choopan is the winner of today's comparison. But will he be the winner on show day? Time will tell. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. I'm eager to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. Who do you have winning this comparison? And perhaps more importantly, who do you have winning the Arnold Classic? Leave me a comment down below. By the way, if you guys are looking for any high quality supplements, be sure to check out Arms Race Nutrition. These are the supplements I use personally, and if you want to pick some up for yourself, be sure to use code PROJECT10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's code PROJECT10 at armsracenutrition.com. Finally, if you guys like this video and want to see more, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and check out my playlist with my other other Arnold Classic previews. With all of that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
Gotta get that Lexi, yeah.